All right, so hello everyone, and welcome to another expert session number 90. My guest today is Stephen Kainth. Stephen, please tell me off soon if I'm not pronouncing your last name
No,
correctly.
that's
Um,
fine.
yeah, just a few things before we begin. First and foremost, I want to thanks our sponsors, so Vtex, commerce platform powering global retail experiences, and Airmeet, the platform enabling our global virtual and hybrid events. Also, um, just if you're interested, this session is live on LinkedIn, and if you want to know more about our community, you're very welcome to sign up to our newsletter. That's a great starting point to understand more about how you can join our community. Stephen Kainth, Kainth has worked closely with Meta and Exilor Luxottica, own and licensed brands such as Ray-Ban and Oakley on smart glasses and consumer behavior. He partners with product and strategy teams on adoption, privacy perception, and interface shifts. His background spans consumer technology, behavioral insight, and go to market strategy across global markets. Stephen focuses on why technologies become natural extensions of daily life, while others never earn social acceptance. Stephen, we have a controversial opening question, typically. And the question for you is just before you introduce yourself, we'll start with this question. Smart glasses are often framed as the next natural interface. If that were true, why does adoption still depend so heavily on brand, fashion, and social permission rather than clear consumer pull?
Okay. So, well, hello everybody, and it's nice to be here with you all. And Carlos, thank you for the invite. Um, you know, um, Tom Ford put this probably best, and that is the head and the face in particular is the most expensive piece of real estate on the human body. And what he
Right.
what he's alluding to is the fact that um, you, your face in particular expresses a certain personality and identity of who you are. Therefore,
Mhm.
brand is really important. You know, we often, the first thing we'll do is look at eyewear, not smart eyewear, just eyewear in general that suits the shape of our face. Um, and then the secondary consideration is the brand. You know, do I want to be associated with a certain brand, and what does that say about me as an individual? Those are key drivers in putting something on your face. So it cannot ever be about technology, about features, about the smarts that are in the glasses. It's always going to be about form and function first before that technology takes over. And I think adoption will be slow. I don't think it'll just switch overnight, but the potential is vast, and we're going to get into more details about why it's so vast and why the big technology companies, all of them to be honest, are investing in developing smart glasses.
Super. Thanks. Stephen, just before we jump in and go, we dive in into your domain of expertise. Many of our members, they're former top level executives now, considering a career as an advisor. Advisors, they're trying to become board members and stuff like that. So I want to ask you about, for those in our community consider a similar career path, and you advise companies. What skills or habits matter most, and what do people usually underestimate? You're an entrepreneur. You advise companies. It's not the same as having a job. So perhaps you can share a few things there.
Yeah, I have to give credit to Microsoft because they were one of my clients. We were doing like retail design work for them, and one of the things that I've always had a passion with is technology. Not just in terms of how it applies to the industry that I was working in, but I've been very curious about technology ever since I was a child. And as soon as I got the opportunity to visit CES, I started going, and I've been going for the last 15 years. Now, Microsoft actually asked if I would come and give their team a presentation on my findings. What did I see? What did I observe? What are the trends? What do they need to know about? And I was sitting there thinking, why the hell does Microsoft want to ask me these questions? Like, you're Microsoft, you know everything about what's going on. The truth of the matter is they don't. And it's the same with every other organization. You have individuals whose job it is to carry out a certain function. And to many people, it's just a job. It's not the same degree of interest and passion that I have with technology in this particular case. So the presentation that I delivered was um, very, very well received. And I was really surprised. I was puzzled. And I asked my client later, I said, what just happened there? Like, you guys surely know about all of this stuff because you're Microsoft. And he said, that is the perception, but it's not the truth, as I've just explained. So actually going in with um, insight, with an understanding and a knowledge of where markets are moving is highly valuable. And Google are incredibly open-minded. They might be working on a certain product and have PhD researchers on it and everything like that, but they still want other people's opinions. They still want to know, well, what are you observing and how are you interpreting what you're hearing and seeing? And that's incredibly valuable. If you can show to do this over time, that becomes a very valuable skill which you can then market as an individual. And in effect, that's what I've built my career on, is about tapping into, cutting edge, bleeding edge technologies, innovations, but pairing it with consumer behavior and having a cultural understanding of the implications of that as well. And it goes back to something that we're starting to hear more about now, and that is the idea of specialism is a relatively new phenomenon. You're a marketeer, you're a technologist, being compartmentalized like that is a relatively new phenomenon. And you may have heard people like Sam Altman saying that the future belongs to generalists, exceptional generalists. Peter Thiel has also said something for decades along the same lines. And what they're basically talking about is it's important to have skills across as many different verticals as you possibly can, because you're able to connect dots and solve problems far better than someone that thinks they're an expert. I actually don't consider myself an expert in anything. Um, I think it's incredibly limiting to think that way. And of course, you have to balance it with what clients are after. And if you say I'm a generalist and I do X, Y, and Z, they might think you're a bit of a jack of all trades. So there is a balance
Yeah, good.
between the two. But I hope that helps. Those
Mhm.
individuals in this community who are looking to get into the kind of thing that I do. It's about putting yourself out there and having opinions that are backed by, insight and data, or just incredible taste. That's actually also part of the mix. If in the culture and sort of design space, it's not about data. It's actually about the accumulation of aesthetics and taste and style that you amass, and then you express that through your own work.
I find that fascinating, and I think the reason why we connected, I was very intrigued by how you were sharing your opinions on LinkedIn 4 5 years ago back then, and everyone was going remote. So I was curious and say, hey man, could we have a chat? I'm trying to build this thing called Evolve here, which has evolved. But I find this very interesting, Stephen, because when you speak to, just to talk a little bit more about that career transition piece, um, we have so many incredible, I mean, executives. They clearly they achieved a lot in their careers, but when they have to go through that transition period, maybe because they have been representing an entity like a big company, they don't know how to speak about their story and their journey. And I think they have this limiting beliefs. Like, for example, you're a content creator. That's how you got my attention, right? And a curator. And I don't want to put you in a box, but for me, you're clearly someone who you're very curious. You're in the luxury and tech space, and you talk about that. So that, in a way, uh, you're portraying an image for the outside, for me, like a person that I'm curious. I want to learn. I want to consume your knowledge, right? And that's how we started our relationship. And I see that many executives, they have this challenge of like, oh, what people are going to think about me, or I'm not good enough. When in reality, it's all theater in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So exploring your interests, and I think what you said there, putting yourself out there, is critical, right?
Yeah, and I urge people who may not have heard of Yuval Noah Harari. He's a historian,
Mm-hmm.
and just one of the most incredible minds. He articulates things so well. He made a comment a few years ago where he said, as a result of AI, most people are going to have to retrain. They're going to have to really rethink about their trajectory going forward, probably every decade, because the efficiency and the specialism of AI is going to be so rapid that it's going to um, create more and more job losses in effect, because it's just efficient to use AI for those tasks and roles. Therefore, you almost have to start again. Like, you might have worked for a large organization and be seen as an expert, but actually, how valuable is that? And the truth is, the hard truth is, it's probably not very valuable anymore, because unless
Mm-hmm.
you can apply that to the current context, your experience is only valuable to a degree. So it's important to have that mindset of adaptability and change, and think, how do I actually stay on top of what's going on and be prepared to do a U-turn when required? And I think those people are going to really excel, versus the ones that are romantic about their past, which
Mm-hmm.
is great at one time, but actually it's almost irrelevant anymore, in the context of today.
100%. Stephen, if we speak about your topics, like if we could start with privacy versus reality, people say privacy is their biggest concern with smart glasses. And from what you see, is privacy the real blocker, or is it something uh, else entirely?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex shift from smartphones to smart glasses, and of course, privacy is a big concern for many people, especially people who um, are not digital natives, or and don't have, sorry, and do have children. Um, they don't want to be filmed. They don't want people, in effect, taking personal data, and that personal data includes an image of their face or a video of their face. Um, and it's a hugely complex topic, and definitely a barrier. Um, I think the technology sector overall hasn't nailed this. And if you look at the trajectory of where things are going, it's probably going to get a lot sneakier from their perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
because what they're doing is aiming at digital natives who aren't as fussed about privacy as older generations that have experienced the world with privacy. If you look at the data around Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and the way they perceive the idea of privacy, it's very different. Just take people,
Mm-hmm.
young girls in their nightwear making TikToks in their bedrooms. In effect, they're opening a door to the world and saying, "Hey, look at me dancing in my bedroom." That is the most intimate space you could ever have. But their view of privacy in that context is so different to yours or mine. So so attitudes are changing, and I think technology companies will align themselves with the core consumer groups they're targeting, who have a different view on privacy as older generations, especially generations that have experienced a world before the internet. And quite frankly, they're not as important anymore. I know that's a harsh
That's
thing
right.
to say. They're just not. They're not the people that are spending the money. They may have the
Like
money,
people,
but
yeah,
they're not
yeah,
the
people
ones.
using fax machines, and it still exists in Germany. I think
Yeah,
in some places, you know.
yeah. No, you're right. You're right. So I think privacy is a complex one. I think what I've just described is one aspect. The adoption also does come to your initial question around your controversial question at the start, where I commented that style and brand are also going to play a part. And of course, evidence of that is Meta doing a multi-brand, multi-year deal with EssilorLuxottica. They now own 3% of EssilorLuxottica. They made a $3 billion dollar investment earlier in the year. So they totally get this. And if you look at what Google are doing as well, they've partnered with Gentle Monster, Warby Parker, and Kering, who own, a bunch of luxury brands. So they absolutely understand that style and brand matters for adoption.
Um, Speaking of privacy, still like because I I I I I don't see how this would differ from like how a smart glass would differ from a phone. We're talking mostly about the device that changes, but still the issue is the same. Or is there anything that changes? I think it's more like you're saying, it's more related to the generation and how they perceive technology
Yeah,
and to the device itself, right? If we could still talk a little bit about the
yeah.
the
No,
privacy
you're
of things
right.
and
I, I think I think you've hit on something which is really, important. We know how much our devices monitor us, and if you've got a smart
Mhm.
speaker, that's doing the same as well, but not just with you, but everyone in the room or your family. Um, I think, that if you, I've been sort of mapping what OpenAI and Johnny Ives is potentially doing with their forthcoming device, which is not a pair of smart glasses, but actually a screenless device that could potentially
Mhm.
be worn as well. I always sort of see it as it could be like a Tamagotchi, almost like this companion that sits and supports you. So it has cameras, it has microphones, it understands your context, whether that's at home, in the office, or on the move, if it's worn. And what it's actually doing is gathering a phenomenal amount of contextual data, which is far richer than what your phone does in isolation. Because the cameras on your phone um, are only activated, when usually you're taking videos or pictures. But if you've got a pair of AR glasses whose cameras are looking at the world in front of you all the time, the amount of contextual data it's gathering is phenomenal. And you may have seen Google's keynote earlier this year where they described a feature called memory. So this is where
Mhm.
privacy really gets quite scary. What memory does on these glasses is you put these glasses on and you go about your day, and then you forgot where your hotel room key was. Where did you put it? And you just ask your glasses, hey Google, where's my hotel room key? And it will tell you where you put it because it's recorded every moment
Mhm.
of your day for a certain period of time. They describe it today as akin to short-term memory because it's storing this data on device. Now, if you've only got a limited number of sort of gigabytes in capacity on your smart glasses, you can't just record endlessly. But you can then, if you give Google permission, you can send that data to their cloud, which means, I mean, they
But
can.
we already, I'm so, yeah, I'm listening to you, and it's fascinating because I already do that. I have the Google Cloud services for my pictures. Some people use Dropbox, whatever they call, but for me, it's Google Cloud. And I have actually two accounts: one for my personal email, and then another one for the business email, which is both are Gmail. So Google Cloud already stores my data, and then to your point about uh, having Google or the wearable device as an extension of your memory, I already feel that very much with the ChatGPT, which we could argue I'm becoming dumber in a way, you know. And but on the other hand, I think it's enhancing a capability, and
Yes.
I have to ask better questions and have better context in order to have an interesting text out there. So while I'm listening to this, I think it makes sense. But on the other hand, it's maybe just an evolution of technology that, you know, it's just natural, and we already do that, you know,
We
like in a hard device like this one. So
yeah, we do. But if you think about the technological concept of multimodality, um,
Mhm, mhm,
this is where device you're not just talking to the device or you're typing into the device, but the device actually becomes ambient. And ambient computing is ultimately where the technology starts to become invisible. And smart glasses is a good example of that, where you
mhm,
may not actually know you've got one of the most powerful pieces of technology in the world sitting right on your face that's connected to some
mhm,
powerful LLM. So it's that contextual piece, the fact that with other technologies, including ChatGPT, and it doesn't matter how intimately you're talking to it, you still have to intentionally get onto it,
mhm,
tap or speak. But if your glasses are observing you 24/7, not
mhm.
24, during your waking hours, you know, you put
Yeah.
then it's gathering so much more data, and not just the
Mhm,
data from a previous the topics that we've been discussing, but actually it will start to gather in time health data,
mhm.
and that health data could
Mm,
be skin temperature, it could be um, um, yeah, pupil dilation and voice patterns, and you know all of these various uh, sort of biometric markers which are being collected by the glasses. And if you then start to pair that with the glasses also collecting ambient information, things like air temperature, in the future also potentially germs and pathogens in the atmosphere,
mhm,
start to stitch that together, and all of a sudden you've got not only powerful technology companies but powerful medical companies emerging. Um, so when you've got a brand like, let's say, you know, Ray-Ban, who is starting to collect biometric data, sorry, um, all of a sudden they've got a health arm to their business,
mhm,
and that data today it's estimated to be worth biometric data about £400 per person. Um, Now, already, according to the World Health Organization, there's about 2 billion people that wear glasses or have had some kind of corrective eye surgery. And because of the rise in myopia, by 2050, the estimation is around 4 billion people will need some kind of corrective lens or other eye related health intervention. So you can see the size of the potential market is phenomenal. It is so
mhm.
that this is why, you know, Meta, Google, Apple, and all the other companies are investing billions into this platform shift.
It's really fascinating. I need I'm short-sighted in English. Yes, so I need to wear glasses, and I completely hear what you're saying. Do you see us moving into Ready Player One sort of, or even there's a movie I really like. It's Minority Report type of world where um you know, like do you remember that scene on in Minority Report? He had to change his what do you call, iris, and
Yeah,
uh you know, he had to get a surgery, and then all of a sudden he got the eyeballs of someone who was dead, and he started seeing advertisement from I think it was Guinness, you know, like
yeah, yeah.
but of course that's a bit dystopian future, but do you see uh, society and the future of tech more like going in that direction? We have Anan here who works in the media space.
Um, I don't think you can say it's going to be one way or another. I think it's going to be a combination of lots of different things. It's going to be, the landscape's going to be very fragmented, as it already is. And things like, contact lens, smart contact lens, they're already a thing. There's a company called Mojo that's been working on them for like 15 years. So, a lot of what you see in things like Minority Report and Ready Player One, these aren't fantastical technologies. They're actually products that do exist today in many regards. I mean, VR, we briefly spoke about that earlier. I don't think VR is ever going to be a mass consumer product, but in terms of escaping reality, it's a phenomenal place to go to escape your current reality. And a lot of people do get lost and immersed in it to the point where they forget they're in real reality. And when I give presentations, I do talk about this, starting off with RR, which is real reality, the physical world around us, and then that moves through things like AR and MR and VR and even new realities that we maybe aren't that familiar with yet, like SR, shared realities, where you're coexisting with, avatars through your smart glasses.
Interesting, very interesting. Stephen, we have some really, really cool people here in the room with us. Vinny, Hendrik, Anand. They all come from a commerce background of sorts. It could be media, it could be commerce strategy and operations, it could be implementing platforms. Vinny was employee number 3 of eBay, for example, in Europe.
Oh, wow.
So, ladies and gents, I'd like you to join our room a little earlier, because I think you would contribute a lot to this discussion. Another thing, Stephen, that I asked you last week. I'm not sure if you have it, but do you have any support material that you would like to share or anything? Should have asked you before, but anyways, if you have anything that you'd like to share, maybe share some examples of uh, stuff that you're seeing, and maybe some more futuristic things, or maybe any support material that you have there. If you'd
Yeah.
like to share, you're very welcome.
Let me just bring this up. So a few years ago, actually, Adobe put together a video, and this video articulated a world with smart glasses. And it's only about a minute long, but actually there are lots and lots of different technologies all converging through smart glasses. So why don't I show you guys this video? Let me just see if I can bring the video up on its own, and then I'll share it. Right. So let me just figure out how I can share on your platform here.
Yeah, there's this arrow pointing up.
Yeah, got it. Okay, right. I'm going to share it now.
Yeah, go
me
ahead.
you can see it. Oh, here we go. It's 1 minute 51. So I'm going to play it, and please interject if you can't hear it. If you can't hear it, it's not a problem. But this is a day in the life of someone wearing smart glasses.
Play music. Okay. There's been an update to your calendar. Show calendar. There's an accident ahead.
Hello.
Show you an alternate route. Yes.
Hello.
Show bio. Save to libraries.
Oh, hey, Jordan.
Hey, Rory.
Yeah.
I saw this on my right end. Might be cool. Climb, half down. It seems that you're making lasagna. Should I turn on the oven? Yes. Preheat oven to 400. Open preferences.
Right. So let me stop sharing that. So what's really interesting about this video is it shows you right across your lifestyle, from the moment you wake up to brushing your teeth and the biometric information that appears in the mirror, right through to what you're seeing and collecting at work. It's all part of living with these glasses, and you can see how addictive they'll become.
Mm-hmm.
And I think scale really is going to come when people start to fear that they're going to get ill, because these glasses will act as preventative healthcare devices. And
Mm-hmm.
just like if you have a car today and you have a camera, certainly in the UK, your insurance premium is far less if it's recording the way you're driving and it has that black box that's monitoring your driving style. This type of thing already exists with wearables like smartwatches and fitness trackers linked to insurance companies like Vitality. The next step from that is what you see with smart glasses, where these devices will really start to understand everything in detail, and then give you cheaper premiums, for example, for health. And I think this is where we're going to start to get scale and new markets emerge.
Brilliant. So this is Vinny. Hawan is coming next. Vinny, welcome in. Good to see
Hi,
you.
Vinny.
Afternoon, all. How are you? Can you hear me?
I'm doing great.
Good. Amazing
Yeah.
so far, Stephen. Thanks. I'm a wearable skeptic, so I was very pleased to hear your context around adoption, and I've been live writing about it as well. I like the child protection aspect up top as well. The data gathering is probably the piece we all overlook because we're so used to thinking through the lens of really quick adoption.
Yeah.
What can we do with it today, as opposed to this is something that's been around for a long time. And the Minority Report is a really good example of technology that's been in play for 24 years, but we're not necessarily ready for it all of the time. I thought that was interesting. Probably the area that is most interesting to me, and you kind of touched on it, was the convergence of power between medtech and technology in general. User adoption on ChatGPT is almost at 1 billion users in just 3 years. I know they're around 10, but since they roll out this public-facing product, that adoption curve is really significant. And you loosely mentioned it as well, that LLMs will have a part to play in all of this. How embedded are they already in the technology space? And like, interesting to hear about Johnny Ives as well. There were so many little details there. You're obviously very close to this. I was just intrigued by the whole thing. I found it fascinating, and just really loved your context all along the way. You tempered our expectation, which was fantastic.
Oh, good. Thank you, Vinny, for that. And clearly, you know your subject matter because you're reading and writing about it widely. I think going back to that original point, you have to really start to think about it much more widely than just a product or an AI or whatever, because there are so many aspects to these devices. When I give presentations to corporations, I usually bring the original image of Steve Jobs when he did that presentation of the original iPhone launch. And I don't know if you guys remember, but he came on stage and he said, "We're launching three products today: a mobile phone, an internet communicator, and an iPod, I think." next generation iPod. And ultimately, he said this 3 times. What he then alluded to is actually these things are converging. We're not launching 3 devices, we're launching 1. Now, I bring this parallel up because actually what smart glasses are doing is converging even further. First of all, they free your hands from having to hold this black glass device and tap on. So you've got access to your hands again. Now, the technology companies are marketing this from the perspective of, well, you're more present as well in front of people, because you're not looking at a screen. But if you've got notifications through merged reality bombarding you, I could be standing in front of you, appearing to be looking into your eyes, but actually my attention is on all of the notifications and all of the alternate realities that are happening through my glasses. There's a phenomenon actually called daydream gazing, which refers to exactly that, where somebody appears to be present, but actually they're not. So I think the shift in behavior is really going to warp the way people start to adopt and use these technologies going forward. And then we'll think actually the time when we were all tapping on our phones was far better because at least you could see what somebody was doing. And they were deliberately rude in front of you, as opposed to appearing in front of you thinking they're present when they're not. I mean, how many times do you speak to your partners and they're like, hello, because you're off somewhere else? It's going to be like that on acid, just so much worse.
I wonder, just weird, like all the weird outputs of that will be really interesting. You think about things like fidelity in marriage, and the legal system will now have to compete with all these other weird areas.
100%. I mean, germophobia, I've written about this, is going to really become a thing. If you're wearing glasses and they say to you, hey, Vinny, there's about a 60% chance you're going to catch a cold in this room because it can monitor the air quality and the germs. How are you ever going to want to go near somebody that you're interested in and want to touch them? Gen Z, for example, already are having far less sex than any other generation. Their view of sex is very different to the group that, in present company, but it's going to drive really weird behaviors and just the way people perceive each other and the world around them through these glasses. I think they're going to be intrusive to a point where it'll almost feel unbelievable. Well, it will be unbelievable. And, Vinny, to your point about the integration of LLMs into smart glasses, Meta uses its Llama model currently. Of course, ChatGPT will be, prominent in whatever they're working on with Johnny Ives, this little, I'm calling it a modern day Tamagotchi, but it's going to be intrinsic, and it's going to be intrinsic because they're already working in a sort of multimodal way. They're going to become truly omnipresent with our world around us. And I just think most people, and certainly corporations, are just not aware of what's pending, what's about to happen. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hawan. Kamal, who's next?
Hey, Stephen. Thank you. Really good. It got me thinking about 3 different things for conversation, So one is a little bit of a, just an open discussion based on the fact that you spoke a lot about data, So I remember there used to be a phase of extrapolation of data. They always used to say, just used to. So, bringing that up, it made me think about, what's going on in the market and how hot data centers are right now, and the consumption of the type of water that needs to go through to run it. So when you mentioned data, actually my thought process, just as an input, was just thinking about, okay, actually, what are the repercussions? How much is going in? How many resources are needed for it? My question actually is, you mentioned a big B word. You said biometrics, okay? And it takes us into another area of concern that, the average person might have. I'd actually propose a different B word. I think it's where, like, I've been spending a lot of my time researching this year, and it falls under like behavioral data. I think, like, for myself, yeah, I never ever thought about capturing hair temperature or, you know, the physical touching and reading. But I've been spending all year looking at behavioral data, what's coming in from technology companies, and just looking at a short Adobe video about somebody actually, hey, and you're just looking at it in that context that you framed it, that is just data. You know,
Yeah.
so for me, it's like, I think the real value to the tech companies, and there's value for consumers in one way, form, or another, but it's being able to, for the first time, be able to capture behavioral data. You know,
Yeah.
and one of my instances, I was around the launch of a big console once in the early noughties, and I remember the statement on the launch, which was like, now we're inside their house. You know, now we're on their screen. They're using us for multiple functions, but we have their attention inside their house. So, like I say, that behavioural bit is, I think, I never thought about the biometrics bit. I know there's a lot to it, and now I can see it, but I always looked at it as well, this is the behavioural element that's been sought after so much. And the final point, just before I pass it back, I'll just think of another case reference, which was ring doorbells. You know, so, I remember reading a case study once about, there's so many ring doorbells on the street now, that actually is quite easily, with technology and the cameras running, to map out the movements of that, because there are cameras active. So there's a little bit of a long-winded one, but those are the three thoughts that I was thinking about as you were speaking, Stephen. And like I said, I think the behavior, the water element and the data center element is concerning, you know, because this year, you know, everybody was making, you know, 3D toys and AI, you know, of themselves, and it was like, you know, so those would be my three points.
I would just add one point to that, and yes, you're right with all of that and the concerns you've got. I would always talk about behavioral data in context, because what these new devices beyond our smartphones are going to do is really understand context. Of course, it's going to be capturing a phenomenal amount of behavioral data just as a result of wearing these products and devices, but it's that contextual piece that makes it incredibly valuable, because you know exactly when it was captured, what you were doing, you know, what was going on around you. And this is why, you know, Tesla is focused on its Optimus robot, because it can then start to also collect contextual data in our world from our viewpoint. And OpenAI, again, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be collecting contextual, behavioral, potentially biometric data, because the value of that is potentially way more than oil. And you know, we are going to see a handful of companies that are valued at over $10 trillion. And you know, will they actually be in that position of supporting humanity through universal basic income because they've made such efficiencies? Someone's got to pay for it. How do you actually support a global society when you've got machines that are far more optimized than humans? And again, I encourage you to read Yuval Noah Harari. He talks about these subjects in detail, and it really does get you thinking about where all of this stuff is going.
How close do you think we are to universal basic income? Are we 10 years?
Can you repeat that?
Sorry, Stephen. I was like, the universal basic income or social income, whatever they're going to call it, feels like it's much closer than we might think. Like, in some strange way, I think governments will have to contend with it in certain countries in the next 3-4 years. Is that wild?
No, I don't think it is wild at all. I think we could see hyperscaling occurring as a result of AI, and the closer we get to AGI, where this becomes a necessity. And again, Sam Altman's experimented with this, quite widely, to see how feasible is it, because he can see what's coming down the pipeline. And I guess in the UK, you know, we've had, you know, government-backed support for a long time. You know, certainly, you know, we've got established systems, and you know, this links into government-backed, centrally distributed digital coins. Why is digital currency so important to governments? Because ultimately it's the new form of governance, and you can control UBI and other future contexts easier when you have an infrastructure that all connects and is governable. This is my point. You've got to really think wide about this, because you can't just look at things in isolation and say I'm an expert, because you can't be with all of these inflection points.
Yeah, it's why I suppose when I look at the world of e-commerce specifically, which is more my playground, I guess, when I look at the infrastructure that's been created in the last 6 months, or the rewiring of it, there's no payment company in the world that hasn't connected and partnered with some LLM, and most of them are connected at multiple layers, and
Yeah,
even the LLMs themselves are sharing data and learning from each other, like such is the nature of them. I think we're underestimating just the seismic nature of the change. I know there's market dynamics that are there, and the open market in America is quite different to the rest of the world, and share price is not a direct correlation to performance, but it's why I suppose I've taken a lot more notice of the world of LLMs this year and the impact that it could have. I I suppose the two areas that become really interesting to me from our perspective is the skills that you talk about. I think that the skill that you need is like customer experience, like being able to take marketing as a feedback loop, this constant feedback loop, and responding to it. That can involve your business model, change production cycles, do whatever, the way you manage cash flow through a business. Then the other side of it is merchandising. So having the ability to be present when that discovery process is happening, bearing in mind you may have no say in that. And I think, again, like when you think about the jobs and the way that functionality is evolving, Shopify have laid bare their plans far more drastically than I think we really care to think about what it is they're going to do. They've set a path out now that's very, very hard to roll back from. And you listen to the agencies and they're saying, where do we go to make money now? You're telling us on one hand, use these great tools, but you've also changed the commission structure to say you're going to pay us based on long-term performance of a brand. What is long-term anymore if everything is real-time? It's a really weird time in commerce in general.
It is. Two things, Vinny, that might, if you're not already aware, apologies if you are, but look into world models, because LLMs are restricted to what they do today. Of course, they're language based, and we've got visual aspects to those as well. But world models are far more interesting, because when you've got robots, cars, smart glasses collecting this contextual data, it's far more than just LLM. It's far, far richer.
Where should I go to read about that, Stephen? Or is there any one or multiple places we can go?
Yeah, I've actually done a bit of research on this, so why don't I point you towards some links or some resources where you can look at. So maybe Carlos can.
Stephen, you're joining the community, so whatever. Please point
okay.
Point.
Oh yeah, of course. Okay. No, but I think that's really important. I think the other thing is, from an ecom perspective, is again, our mindset is still fixated in either physical stores or shopping online. But when actually, your smart glasses use its object recognition technologies powered by AI, of course, and can recognize the world around you, everything becomes shoppable. You no longer have to go down that journey of discovery. If I'm sitting here and I'm looking at you guys right now and I think, I like Kamal's hat, his cap he's wearing, my glasses could tell me exactly what that is and where to buy it straight away. And that changes the way we think about discovering products and acquiring products. And of course, as we've seen with Shopify and Amazon and the big e-com giants today, they understand this, and this is the direction they're moving into, because that customer journey is going to be very different in discovering and consuming products than thinking about it in the context of I need to be on a screen to do it.
Yeah, I see a world of passive commerce in the not too distant future where something will just land on your doorstep knowing that it's needed, or your fridge talks to your toilet and your toilet says Vinny is at that age
Yeah.
now where he's lactose intolerant, get him some soy milk.
You're right. Amazon actually has a patent to that effect, not
Yeah.
quite to that effect, but it's called anticipatory shipping, which is where it predicts what you need and it will just send it to you, and then you have the option to return it if you don't need it. But it gets so good that you do need it, and they'll ultimately just wipe away so many businesses by doing this, because the efficiencies that they'll achieve through understanding consumption needs and behavior will far outstrip any corner shop or any supermarket.
It's going to be so hard to be a closet alcoholic now. My wife will see beers landing at 7
Yeah, true.
Hawan, please ask your question.
Oh, Hawan, I can't hear you. I don't know if anyone else can.
Not yet. Carlos, I can't hear you either.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hendrik, yes, that's. I was gonna say Hendrik, please.
Strap in, Stephen. Strap in.
So, firstly, Stephen, thanks for joining us. And I think, having thought about this sector and done some research on it, I think this is the clearest and most thought out. I wouldn't say debate, or I just clearly hear somebody that actually understands this. I couldn't help but wonder, what you explained for me almost sounds like the personal LLM of the future, in the sense that the challenge that I think LLMs have at the moment is that there's a ginormous disconnect between what technology wants and what humans want. And I think with the early success that Ray-Ban and Meta has had, it for me makes total sense as to why these companies would do it. And I think your point about the medical medtech thing, I think that's much more real than what I think folks on this call actually understand. In the sense that that's once again the holy grail for retail marketing. That's the data that everybody wants, that nobody has access to. So my question to you is, as somebody that operates in this sector daily, weekly, monthly, what is the thing that surprised you the most in 2025 with the sector of smart loss?
Good question, Hendrik. And I would say, actually, the more I get deeper into the whole healthcare aspect of smart glasses, the more convinced I become. I've been fortunate to give presentations and be part of sort of skunk work operations at some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies. And it surprises me how little they know about what's a threat to their business. Now, I think when you start to have technology companies that are able to offer highly compelling preventative healthcare data, ultimately people are just going to become less ill. It's a fact. So pharma, their market share has to decrease as a result of that. Now, we know the pharmaceutical industry is incredibly murky, the way it's connected to ag tech and other industries. So it's never going to be clear and straightforward. They're always going to figure out a way of making money, even if that's not through the kinds of ethics that you and I would hope for. But unfortunately, we live in a capitalist society, and money rules. But I think this is important to understand. The pharmaceutical industry, it takes a minimum of 10 years to get a drug to market traditionally. That's going to become shorter through AI. It costs at least $1 billion. Technology, including AI, is still unregulated. Software is incredibly cheap. So the speed to market is far, far quicker. So these companies like EssilorLuxottica and Meta and Google and and people playing in this preventative healthcare space are going to exploit that as much as they can, as quickly as they can, to the point where you get mass adoption, and therefore we become addicted to these technologies. Now, if you just, another point which is important is the overall healthcare industry, if you include insurance, today is worth about $15 trillion. If you look at the size of that market, the potential technology has to carve out a new niche in it, it's huge. And by 2030, with the way AI is going, according to ARK Invest in New York, the global economy could be about 180 trillion, of which about 50 or 60 could be health. So the size of the market is huge. And this is why they're all investing so much into it, and why healthcare is so important. You only have to look at the patents across the board to see the kinds of, the way they're thinking about the future. Now, we know a patent is never an indication of what will be developed, but I think the pattern across the board highlights this trajectory we're on.
That's so interesting. Helen, go ahead. Let's see if we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, good. Stephen, it's been a really interesting session. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your point of view. Really, it's been really good.
Very welcome.
And I love that you and Carlos mentioned Ready Player One. It's my favorite movie actually, so I really love this this scenario. But yeah, I will share something that I've been thinking about. Like today, we are really very dependent in our smartphones and internet, and it's like it's impossible to imagine a life without that. But as we started to widely adopt smart glasses also, and as the video that you showed, it seems like our relation with technology and the dependence the digital dependence will only increase. And of course, I'm from technology, so I love that. But part of me is always asking, are we on the right track? Are we physically ready to be 100% the time that we are awake connected to everything else? Our brain are ready for that? So I'd like to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts about that.
Howard, I'm so glad you asked this question, because I'm very passionate about this. I think we're already starting to see, anti-tech and anti-AI movements happening, where people are going off grid more. They're spending time with each other more than just doing it through digital devices. I started meditating a few years ago because, of course, I'm a heavy tech user, but I understand the implications and the consequences of that. I think it's important to connect with nature and the natural world around us. Why is myopia on the rise? Why is half the world by 2050 going to need glasses? Because they're not only staring into screens, but they're spending more time doing concentrated work in front of a screen, on a laptop, on a computer, or whatever it might be. Therefore, they're spending less time outside. You need UVA rays to hit your eyeballs, so your eye health can regenerate healthily. So being outside and connecting with nature is going to be a fundamental part of a healthy world going forward. And I think those people that prioritize time away from technology will become the healthiest people, on the planet. And it's probably going to be people that are either incredibly poor, who don't have access to the technology, or people that are incredibly rich, that have got advisors and have the knowledge and the tools to advise against the consequences of these things. I mean, we didn't even touch upon the negative consequences of some of these things that we've already seen, but it's going to get really dark quite quickly. And I think you guys all can see this, but the average person that doesn't have their finger on the pulse, they're just going to fall into this trap of addiction and reliance on outsourcing their brain and personality and everything else. I don't think ChatGPT and AIs make you dumber. I think they make you smarter if you know how to use them. But for most people, they're not looking at it that deeply.
What will the role of government be then? They've lost so much power, and regulation will only do so much, and fines are so inconsequential that they really don't have the power that they should have. What do you view the role of government?
Vinny, great question. And I would urge you to read a chapter. The book is called The Network State by Balaji Srinivasan. And he has a chapter in this book called God State Network.
Yeah.
And it's all focused on this topic of, thousands of years ago, people were in fear of God. If you do something wrong, you're going to go to hell. And that's what people live by. That's what the format of governance was. That switched when we started to see organized governments, and it was no longer if you do something wrong you're going to go to hell. It was if you do something wrong you're going to go to prison. Now we're entering this era where you're not going to go to prison if you do something wrong, and you're not going to go to jail if you do something wrong. You're going to get cancelled online, and that's just as bad for many people because it's the end of their life, because they live in and on their devices. If you get cancelled and you've got 1 million followers and your life depends on that community you've built, everything comes crashing down. So governments with CBDCs, centrally distributed bank coins, act in that network state space where they will understand your consumption behavior through the way you deploy your own financial resources. So governance switches to something far more controlled. And if you read the white paper that the British government put out, they explicitly say it's programmable money, which means if they don't like what you're spending your money on, they'll stop you spending it.
Yeah.
So
and hence the payment companies are trying to create their own networks away from all that, or to tap into it to be relevant in the eyes of government.
Well, I think the payment companies have to follow, the law and the infrastructures in place. But where people are finding a degree of freedom is by operating in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, because if that is off grid, and there are countries now competing for people without intervening into their financial matters who hold large sums. So there's about 50, 70 people in the world that are crypto billionaires, and they all have a second passport at the very least in Singapore. Why is that? Because the Singaporean government don't need to know your financial status, so they give them refuge in that in that country. Estonia is another one in Europe, which is super high tech, and you've got more financial anonymity over there than you do in, say, the UK or the US.
We are opening our entity in Estonia, Gustavo and I.
Oh, are you?
Not for those reasons, but
Yeah.
You could have chosen a better time to say that.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many places
on
that
LinkedIn. What's not to like?
Yeah.
Just after the Singapore office.
Singapore. No, but look into trends around second and third passports. The wealthy are doing this because they're looking at places like Singapore, Estonia, New Zealand, where they're given privileges for citizenship, and ultimately the rich, of course, have always been the most mobile group of people in the world, and they're just getting even more mobile and more sophisticated in how they're operating.
Interesting. Gents, I've got to be rude and drop off for a school run. But Stephen, thank you. It was fascinating. Really.
Yeah. Oh, nice to meet you, Vinny.
Likewise, and thanks, guys, everyone, again.
Thanks, Vinny.
See you next week.
Thanks very much. All right. So, Stephen, that's a little bit of the community. I hope you enjoyed this. I mean, I enjoyed very much, and I'm sure that everyone here and who's on LinkedIn, and we're gonna amplify what what you just shared within our community and WhatsApp, and so really great. We have an unspoken tradition which is becoming more official, and Hendrik is doing is typically wrapping up our session. So Hendrik, would you be so kind and please go ahead and what are the main learnings and why this session was worth our time, and what did you learn?
So today's conversation highlighted to me that those of us who use technology needs to wake up to the fact that the interface of the future will be no interface. So that for me is a big learning. Secondly, I think when you have somebody as knowledgeable and as forthright as Stephen, it's very clear that he's very passionate about this field. But I think for me, the thing that I particularly enjoyed was that fact that this conversation morphed from being, topic specific to becoming like an entire discussion on the future of technology and how technology could impact our lives even further than what it is. I'm convinced after today's conversation that the eyes hold the future for all of the technology companies. It for me, it just makes sense. And I think framing it that, will be a health benefit is the way that, these companies will potentially, fuel adoption. I think for me, the biggest takeaway from all of this is that those of us who work in technology, we need to think about, there's a very famous management quote that I always think about, and that is that leadership is organizing the non-obvious. And today, the non-obvious that I did not see coming was Stephen talking about health tech, med tech, and the future of technology with it. On that note, I'm fascinated to see where this goes. And I think Stephen has made the argument without actually saying it that this is where the puck is going to go. And for most folks, that'll be scary because there's lots of concerns over this. But we have to understand that in technology, there's a wide variety of people that are early adopters. That's why Stephen mentioned at the end, somebody that has 1 million followers and that person basically being cancelled and how big of a deal that is. This is why I love the Evolve community on a Thursday, in the sense that, once you click on that link, or once you click on the link inside the WhatsApp community to essentially book your seat for the day, I'm always amazed at what it leads me to think of an hour later on that. On that note, Stephen, thank you for, being very forthright and I think very informative about where things are going to go. To my dear friends, Gustavo, who's somewhere in the background, and Carlos, guys, well done for once again basically making it impossible to beat this session for the week, because this is what you do. And on that note, I hope everybody has a good week. Cheerio.
Amazing, man.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Stephen, if folks want to know more about your work, we're going to promote whatever links you have, presentations. We'd love to. If you have a book, more than happy. But yeah, where to find you, man?
Yeah, look, LinkedIn is the best thing. And I mean, one of the things that I'm super passionate about is just upskilling, C-suites on what's going on, because in my experience so far, many of them don't see some of the topics that I've spoken about. And these things could become hugely expensive disasters for them if they're not aware. So my focus for 2026 is really that, if you guys know, CEOs that are interested in, well, CEOs that are open-minded enough to want to know where the future's going, then I'll be running sessions with companies, talking about some of these things and how they can prepare for the future.
Brilliant. Happy to promote. Please, we'll speak in private, but you're most welcome to join Evolve. The caliber is very high, but I would prefer if you join, and if we could do more of these sessions. I think they're very valuable. We have roundtables and so on. And again, you're working, so it's amazing. And
No, I can see that from the group of people you've got,
Yeah.
the questions that were asked. It's
Sweet.
nice
Yeah.
to be in good company.
Yeah, they're very smart. I'm just a catalyst, with Gustavo. So amazing, Stephen. Appreciate you, man. Hey everyone, thanks very much for another Thursday. So see you all guys soon.
Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Likewise.